Hello, everyone. I am so thrilled to introduce Rochelle Etienne, Executive Vice President of Professional Learning at Student Achievement Partners, and a fan favorite from last year's summit, Robin McClellan, Supervisor of Elementary Education of Sullivan County Schools in Tennessee. Rochelle and Robin's high energy and extensive knowledge are the perfect way to kick off day two. I can't wait to learn more about the best practices we need to unlearn within the five conditions. Rochelle and Robin, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Robin and I are so excited to talk with you today. It's Friday. We decided to inspire our change mindsets and our unlearner mode with a little bit of energy and thinking about the kinds of changes we as the adults in the system must make for the benefit of our students. Robin and I are going to introduce ourselves and set the frame for our time today. Robin, I can see you. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen? Excellent. All right, so Robin and I are excited because I really was excited. We were both excited by the energy and the kind of message of today's learning sessions, which is unlearning. Um, Oftentimes, as educators, our first priority is we're in learn mode. We're learning. We encourage our students to learn. And to really achieve the changes we know are necessary, we're going to talk about some gut checks today, some things that we could probably think about doing and changing in our practices every single day that will make significant differences for students. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Rochelle, spelled like Rachel. Um, and I am a Marylander, New Yorker, and Ohioan. I lived in New York as a child. I lived in the Midwest in Ohio for some time, and I went to college even in Michigan for some point. But now I live in Maryland with my family. I'm also a self proclaimed virtual learning expert, and really self proclaimed, as I put the emphasis on that. I think I'm a virtual learning expert because currently I have three students who are at home with me learning virtually. And in our household, we cover the gamut of educational experiences. We have a daughter who's in high school, our son is in middle school, and our youngest daughter, she is in elementary school. So I feel like I know everything about virtual learning right now, like it or not. I call myself a habitual coach. I really do love working with people, pushing conversations, examining ourselves and others, and thinking about how we can always and ever improve for our students. And I'm also what I'm calling an impatient yet hopeful change agent. This year has, in many ways, I feel like galvanized and probably radicalized me a little bit. Time is just not on our side, and we've learned so much in the last year. And so I believe that with these kinds of conversations about challenging the status quo, that we can actually make the necessary changes that this year has really made it kind of unavoidable to realize. So now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Robin.
So Rochelle and I have become fast friends because she definitely is the beauty and brains behind this effort. But just a little bit about myself. I am a past teacher, principal, and supervisor of elementary education in Sullivan County Schools, Northeast Tennessee, rural Appalachia. I'm in the year 5 of the implementation of high quality instructional materials in our district. And it's been the greatest, most important, most challenging work of my career. And even after finishing year 4, going into year 5, we're definitely still a work in progress. We have not arrived and just continual learners. I am a Tennessean and Pennsylvanian. I attended Penn State University, very proud of that, and then did some doctoral work, master's and doctoral work at East Tennessee State University. I am an advocate for high expectations. And in my opinion, that bleeds and blends right into being an advocate for equity. I always joke, I know you guys don't like me to put myself down, but when I was in high school, I so wanted to be a cheerleader. It was just the dream, but I was always too chubby. I mean, let's just be real and throw it on the line. So now my favorite part of my career is that I do get to be a cheerleader, but it's a teacher cheerleader. I'm the wife to a very patient man. and a mom to a teenage daughter. And if at any point through this whole time you should applaud Rochelle and me right now, the fact that we're raising teenage children. It's just a hot mess. Excited to be here. The only problem with doing it this way is I'm a hugger and I just feel like depleted because I don't get to hug my people. And I looked over the attendee list and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm missing so many opportunities. But I did want to share one little fun story with you. Last year, I was totally fangirling Eric Hirsch. And at that time, I might have thought he was the son of E.D. Hirsch. Now I know better, but I put them on the same level because he does such great work for our kids. So last year, we were having our social, and I asked this lovely lady that was standing behind him, I'm like, can you please take a picture of me and my pretend boyfriend, Eric Hirsch? And she took the picture, and then she looked at me and she said, well, I am his wife. And so let me tell you, that was definitely an uh-oh moment, hashtag uh-oh. So just a little bit about our time together today. Rochelle and I will be transparent and we will be real. And to that end, I love the quote, we will never tell you a lie, but we may tell you too much truth. So you have to take it all with a grain of salt, but know that we're here for kids. And we have some sacred cows we're going to really push you to release. And so I'm an analogy weirdo. And so I guess what I would say is it's time to release the sacred cows from the barnyard and let's dig in. Rochelle, back to you.
Thank you, Robin. I think you all can clearly see why Robin is hands down my favorite person to collaborate and present with. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy learning from her wisdom throughout the day. So, just before we jump in, I have just been a fan of Impact Florida for years now. I work for an organization called Student Achievement Partners. I am the executive vice president of professional learning at Student Achievement Partners. And our priority has always been to impact literacy and math outcomes for K-12 students nationally, with a particular focus on accelerating academic progress for students who face barriers of racism and poverty. And all along the way, Student Achievement Partners has seen so much connection and partnership with Impact Florida. We're so thankful to be asked to join the conversation today. So, over the past couple of days, you've engaged in learning and discussion about the 5 conditions that support great teaching. These are the conditions that leaders and educators can control in their classrooms to improve student engagement and learning. And I feel like that is kind of where the power is. The word control matters here. This isn't elements that are outside of ourselves. We, the professional learning providers, the policymakers, the district leaders, the school leaders, the teachers, we actually have control. We are the designers of these conditions. And if the conditions are not working for students, we have control and power to redesign. And I find that to be very encouraging and powerful. Today, Robin and I are going to have a discussion about some of the best and not so best practices that are pervasive across our education system. And they actually create the barriers that are making these conditions very difficult to achieve. We heard in the early video, one of the students said, she was talking about the equity visual that we're also familiar with the crates and the students stacked up. And she said, honestly, the work is just to take the fence down. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we take those barriers down? We're going to confront some of the well-established but often harmful practices and decisions that make great teaching challenging, frustrating for teachers and for students. Teachers and students who are the very people closest to the problems and opportunities of our education system. Throughout the session, Robin and I will discuss the habits that we personally had to reconcile and atone for ourselves and for our colleagues. And we're going to ask you to consider your own practices and habits and confront those sacred cows all along the way. All right, so let's take a look at one of the first conditions. And you notice our little sacred cow is already following us, right? The first condition is to establish a shared vision of what great teaching looks like, so that every student can succeed. And honestly, it's a tale as old as time, this alphabet soup. We as educators love an acronym. As I was preparing for this session, I had to consciously force myself to stop using acronyms as I was preparing the words I was even going to share with you today. Sometimes in our spaces, we're navigating a ton of information, and acronyms help us remain efficient, or so we think. More often than not, these acronyms hide the essence of the very real conditions and concepts that deeply impact our students. So during the pandemic, Students and student access to free and reduced price meals and social emotional learning um, took center stage as issues impacting the safety and well-being of students. Most significantly, the safety and well-being of Black and Brown students and students living in poverty. But I can't tell you how many times I've been in district conversations where someone says, "Oh, farm kids," or the SEL lesson. And by just saying that, it actually diminishes the kind of significance of the conditions those acronyms are naming. Farm isn't just a data point for Title I funds, and SEL wasn't just a professional development topic. They emerged as crucial conditions for great teaching or barriers to great teaching or any teaching at all. Our best practices around how we support students' access to free and reduced meals and our professional learning around social emotional learning flew right out the window, and we had to start from zero. By using clear and precise language, we can make the invisible visible. The relationships between people and problems are often driven by techniques that allow problems to be solved with speed, agility, and economy, right? Think acronyms, best practices, efficient, quick. However, these pre existing schemas can perpetuate problems and prevent us from seeing the best solutions. It's time to let go of those sacred cows. I encourage you to check yourself when you use those shortcuts. Make the effort to name the thing, explain it, understand it, and solve it. I'm going to hand it over to Robin, who's going to give you her perspective on how she had to let go of some sacred cows in her districts when it comes to creating a shared vision for instruction.
So back in the days of district accreditation, you probably all remember those scars. We spent days building a shared vision for our school. We worksmithed and sweated and argued and finally arrived at consensus. And honestly, with like 49 women on staff and two males, I don't know how we ever arrived at consensus because that's just a lot of personality and conversation. But it was all showy jargon. I mean, just like Rochelle just talked about. I love that she just talked about the acronyms and how it really takes away the impact of talking about the children who are in the condition of needing meals. It's so true. And so we were maintaining the status quo by building what others wanted. 5 years ago, when we were building our vision for our work in literacy, as we were really trying to create this literacy revolution, which was by implementing high quality materials, we learned about reading science research and what excellent instruction really looks like in reading, and outlined by the academic standards and tied to those and meeting those. And we spent our time working toward achieving the vision and living the work toward the vision rather than it just being a vision to get a check on a document. So now that vision grounds our academic strategy and theory of action. And our literacy vision is concise, but it's aiming for the bullseye, see the bottom bullseye, rather than the sacred cow. Look, I put a little funny graphic on there because that cow's getting ready to be hit by an arrow, but we don't need to be aiming for the whole cow. We need to be aiming for an exact, precise target. So our vision is simple. Our vision is just simply, we want all K-5 students, because that's my area of expertise and work, to access high literacy content and instruction that supports them to be proficient readers, writers, and thinkers.
Thank you, Robin. I love your point about kind of performative action versus real action. And that is just absolutely so true. So the second condition that is essential to creating the conditions for great teaching is access and achievement with instructional materials, specifically high quality, academically rigorous instructional materials. Over the past decade, the availability and the innovation of standards aligned instructional materials has increased dramatically and quite hopefully. I mean, I love perusing all of the new curriculum resources that seem to be always available. You heard from your one of your the Impact Florida sponsors right at the beginning. I'm such a fan of Learn Zillion. Um, there's access to for purchase or even free open education resources now, and that has put good materials in the hands of teachers. I can't tell you how much time as an educator, as a teacher myself, a young teacher, I spent hunting down the just right materials I needed for my students. And so a new standard has been set for what our notion of high quality materials are. However, yesterday you heard from Zaretta Hammond and her work on culturally responsive teaching in the brain and what we must do to actually promote authentic engagement and rigor among culturally and linguistically diverse students. Standards alignment, while I and my organization have been proponents of the standards from day one, standards alignment is not enough. We've seen states and districts adopt materials, pour tons of energy and effort and money into implementation, only to abandon the investment and go back to familiar materials and practices. Why does that keep happening? It's because standards alignment alone isn't working for kids and teachers. It's absolutely necessary. Don't get me wrong. And please don't go back to student achievement partners and say Rochelle said the standards don't matter. They do, but they're certainly not sufficient. Can we actually claim high quality materials if the materials themselves don't authentically engage all students through content, through its content and through its instructional practices? We really can't. We have to let go of that limited view of high quality, that sacred cow. When we broaden and redefine our notion of high quality to include both ideas of culturally and linguistically responsive materials and standards alignment, that's when we reach true high quality materials. I'm going to hand it over to Robin to talk about the value instructional materials has played in her work in Sullivan County.
So in Sullivan County, you'll see two pictures on the slide, and they're both very related to our work over the last 4.5 years. On the left side, you will see that this is an Ed Reports rating of the gateways of the core knowledge language arts curriculum that we began adopting 5 years ago and now are in full implementation. And on the right, you'll see teachers who have stepped up as leaders. And as we build their capacity, they are actually the ones who get the work done so that the curriculum can do its job. So when you think about twins, actually, I don't know the Bible as well as I thought, because I thought Cain and Abel were twins. They're not. I Googled it. So if you think about famous twins, you'll think about Jacob and Esau. And then not so biblically, you'll think about the Olsen twins. Or, I mean, I don't know. That's just my guess, but that's probably judgy. But then you know things that just go together: peanut butter and jelly, peas and carrots, Penn State football, pizza, and beverages. And now, after our work together, Rochelle and Robin are in that category of perfect duos. Let me tell you, I'm such her fan. So, adoption and implementation of high quality materials is a game changer in our fight for equity. Those materials that equip our teachers to set a high bar of expectations for every learner is the foundation of the house and building. They're the footers. I talk about that analogy a lot. But the teacher is the cornerstone. So once the footers are in place, the teacher holds everything together. If you don't create structures and strategy that we'll be talking about next to support teachers through implementation of these strong materials, we're still a work in progress. Remember, the adoption of high quality materials will be in vain. Before high quality materials, we had no idea what children were capable of, and teachers rose to the challenge. As I shared last year at this summit, when we first started our journey 5 years ago of high quality materials, I told our teachers in the very beginning, after I set the stage of the why, 1/3 of kids reading on grade level is our why, and it's appalling, and we're going to do something about it. But then I told our teachers, I will never place expectations on you that limit your potential or doubt your capability, #opportunity myth. So as I told them, I will never place a glass ceiling on them. Don't you ever put a glass ceiling on our children and limit their potential and capacity.
Thank you, Robin. So, Robin just set the stage for kind of the next part of this dynamic duo of instructional materials. And the 5 conditions lay it out perfectly. And that's professional learning, effective professional learning systems and structures that really go hand in hand to support the implementation of really high quality instructional materials. So I am a career educator. I was one of those kids who played school and then actually went to school to keep playing school. Um, and my mother, she was a special education paraprofessional for 30 years. And recently, I was talking to her, and through some research that we were doing at Student Achievement Partners, I became very curious about the kind of professional learning she received as an educator in the 80s. She described sitting in an impersonal kind of auditorium or cafeteria for what she called faculty training, where everyone, regardless of which subjects they taught, which grades they supported, and what unique student needs they were trying to meet, they all sat and listened to the same presentation. And because these workshops had to apply at least a little bit to everyone in attendance, they focused on generic topics, things like lesson planning or differentiated instruction, but they never ever really drilled down into the subject and student specific questions that my mom had. These workshops were one and done. People went in, they listened politely, they left, and sometimes they tried a thing or two that they'd heard. Most of the time, though, they just talked junk about the presenters. So that I reflected on my own experiences as a teacher in the early 2000s. I was at a really wonderful school. The school provided curriculum and professional learning, which was more than I could say for some of my colleagues who I was graduating from my teacher prep program with. But I was often handed a bunch of printed strategies, materials, ideas, and I was up to me to stitch them together into something that would meet the specific interests and strengths and needs of my students. Back then, the internet wasn't as advanced, so searching for a subject and topic or grade specific content was so time consuming and oftentimes fruitless. And in my school, we didn't have coaches. So we teachers often just banded together. And when it came to trying to apply the things, we just did it together. So now it's 2020 and things have changed a lot. We have really rigorous standards. There's so much more availability, as we talked about, for instructional materials. Teachers have a much stronger understanding of what students know and what they need to be able to do. And thank goodness, the internet is ready to provide answers, sometimes helpful, sometimes the opposite of helpful, to almost any question you could come up with. Robin just said she got to Google, information just like that. So there's also, though, a renewed focus on the research, the evidence that it provides about what actually works in teaching. And there's an intensifying intolerance for the fact that for far too long, our classrooms have not been equitable. It's what we've been talking about for the last 2 days. It's what we've been talking about intensely in our education system now for a while. Certain learners are privileged, and we are ignoring the needs and contributions of others. So, what does that mean for professional learning today? So, Student Achievement Partners, we embarked on a project to find out what present day professional learning needed to include to meet the demands of today's teachers. In addition, through combing through tons and tons of research, we just talked to teachers. We talked to a lot of teachers. During these interviews, we learned that usually the professional learning received didn't actually match what teachers really wanted. It didn't answer the questions they had, it didn't address the needs of their students, it didn't build on the foundation of the materials they used in their classrooms, it didn't help them to take actions to create conditions or to provide ongoing support. The professional learning experiences that we heard about in 2020 sounded all too familiar with the professional learning experiences I had back in 2000 and that my mom had back in the 80s. So, how do we break this cycle of misspent time and unsatisfactory support? We landed on three principles. They're right here on the screen. And these principles clearly define the contours of what high quality professional learning experiences for teachers needed to look like and include. And that document that outlines these principles was shared with you as pre reading for this session. So I really do encourage you to dig into it. It's not that long, but it does point you to some of the most actionable and relevant research and practices that we were able to identify. You'll even see some familiar faces, including in that research and some of those studies, including Zaretta Hammond. She is listed as one of the folks who contributed to that work. So, what do we have to give up? And I have to say, the sacred cow on this slide is pretty big, and that's on purpose. This is going to be hard to hear for some of you. But sometimes the sacred cow is a person. It might be the professional learning provider that has supported your system for years. It might mean taking a look at yourself, at figuring out where we might need to adapt our own practices or make space for a new partner who has curriculum expertise or some other content expertise that will provide a much better or improved professional learning experience for teachers. Or the sacred cow might be the presentation that you've been cultivating for years, refining each slide, adding new images. It might mean throwing it out and starting to have to create more customized and responsive materials for each partner and client that you come across. That sounds like a tremendous amount of work, and it is. But it's more work, but it's definitely more effective. So, when we ask you to consider this sacred cow, you don't have to tell anyone, but think about who or what that cow may be and how close they are to you as a professional in this system. Robin, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about what effective professional learning may or may not look like.
I actually did a webinar with spearheaded by Rochelle and with student achievement partners, and I really had to dig in on these to really understand what it was that we were expecting and the goal and the destination of our professional learning. So I was able to really think about our partnership with TNTP and how they have led us to this path of professional learning. But I didn't even really know the destination. I just know I needed a strategy partner. And because I'm like this global, probably very ADD thinker, and streamlining is difficult for me. So they helped us put together this strategy that now you will see is so completely aligned with student achievement partners, principles for professional learning. So principle one, I'll just be brief. Principle one, professional learning must be content focused. Y'all, back in the day, I swear, I think we had PD on scrapbooking. And that shows I'm like 48 and old, and I'm not a good mom. So her scrapbook has like 2 pages in it. But I know we had a PD on scrapbooking. Now, don't judge our district because that was, 23 years ago. Hashtag wish I was kidding, but I'm not. But with the implementation of HQIM, there's another acronym. I'm sorry, Rochelle, high quality instructional materials. This strategy of spiraled learning was grounded in these 3 principles. So principle one, content focus. You will see there an actual document that one of my teachers completed. It's actually a unit prep. And so at the beginning, she wrote about, she had to go to the end and dig into what are the enduring understandings of the whole domain. And then she had to look at what are the essential questions that I'm going to use to lead children to arriving at that enduring understanding. And then each lesson she unpacked, what is my goal for each lesson? So what is the question, the big question I want kids to be able to answer at the end of each lesson? This is unlike any other streamlined lesson or unit prep protocol that we've ever used. But when we bring them together for PD, we're not doing scrapbooking, my friends. We're doing digging into the units of study so that they can be ready to tackle and nuance the learning that goes on and really pull and provide equity through opportunity for all children. And then principle two, professional learning must be teacher and student centered. So this is our strategy document for the past school year. We already have our updated one, but it's still a work in progress. TNTP sits down and partners with us. They don't present these things to us, which is what I love about the organization. And I know there are other organizations out there. This is just my experience. I'm not being paid by TNTP, I promise. That's somebody accused me one time of like being paid by higher quality instructional materials. And I'm like, good Lord, if that's the worst thing you ever say about me, then stick a nail in it. I'm done. That's fine. So this strategy document, you can't see it well on the screen, but I have highlighted the word student or teacher with green lines, and you will see throughout our strategy, there are green lines everywhere because it's all centered in what do teachers need to do to have these student outcomes. And so that principle two, professional learning is student and teacher centered. If it's not, then shame on me. And principle three, professional learning must be instructionally relevant and actionable. This, the term instructional leader has been tossed around in a million places and a million times. And let me show you exactly what that means quickly. So our leaders have to eliminate obstacles so that teachers have time to prep and collaborate and use these protocols to really be ready to teach. the professional learning, we have to give them time to practice. And then our principals use the instructional practice guide to go through walkthroughs that are very non-punitive and very transparent and just all in the name of student learning. And then our principals, we learned this also from Kate Glover, who's our TNTP contact and project manager. All we need to do is when we look at those walkthroughs and look at the data, give a teacher what is your one next best step. So if my area is really providing equity to every child being able to talk about it and process it, I might be using Doug Lemov's strategy on no opt out. And so that teacher can take the no opt out strategy, implement that already in the high quality materials that she doesn't have to create, and then be able to take the next best step to be able to provide equity of opportunity for all children in the room, and not just call on the ones who raise their hands, which we all know happens, as did in my classroom. Then our principals have to follow up for support. So going back to that teacher, and I did not do a good job of this as a leader, follow up with that teacher and say, hey, talk to me about, have you eliminated this obstacle? Have you taken your one next best step? What do I need to do to provide you support? And then celebrate the work and celebrate when you do see those next steps and the teacher coming back and saying, oh my gosh, I've had this epiphany. And then you repeat the process. And if the principals do not learn the curriculum and establish trust with the teachers, then none of this will be possible.
Robin, it's like we rehearsed this somehow, right? Empowered leaders are specific and they get right to the heart of it and know those specific actions to replicate. And that's the next condition that we're talking about today. Empowered leaders are school leaders who focus on scaling great teaching beyond individual classrooms. And what we have up on the screen here is the sledgehammer versus scalpel approach. Scaling often makes us think about big things, generalizable practices that anyone can use and that we can get a lot of people to use. And that scale means big. And so, like a sledgehammer, that can knock through a lot of walls. We can take down a lot of barriers by approaching things that way. However, using tools that anyone can use and apply across contexts doesn't always yield applicable information for all. So remember what I described about my mother's professional development, right? General strategies on good questioning or differentiated instruction. Yes, that is what everyone should be doing, whole scale. But how do I do that in my mathematics classroom for middle school? How do I differentiate from my K2 early readers? Um, it may seem counterintuitive, but empowered leaders take a much more precise approach by using content specific frameworks and tools, and they dig into the nuance of the discipline. So, in this case, back to the saying the uncomfortable, the sacred cow might mean taking a look at some of the general observation rubrics that are used in our systems, right? The rubric that can be used across any classroom. How can you make those tools and frameworks more specific, more actionable, right? Empowered leaders, they read the text. Empowered readers do the math that their kids are or their teachers are going to be doing. And then they isolate those specific and effective practices and then figure out how to share those things far and wide. I had a friend of mine, I mentioned that I went to college to be a teacher, and he was in my undergrad with me the whole way through. We caught up years later, and he was a physical education and health sciences major. And he was honestly like a really amazing physical education teacher at his school. He then became the athletic director of the entire district. He really just completely innovated the athletic program. He elevated academics in a way that had probably never been seen before. This was a district where they were really a high performing district in terms of athletics. Lots of Black and brown boys playing basketball, football, and just absolutely achieving in those areas. But he realized that the academic support for students wasn't there, and he completely changed the athletic program in his district. Fast forward, he then becomes a school principal, and he becomes a school principal of a primary school, a K-3 elementary school. And my friend, I remember talking to him, he said, oh my goodness, I don't know what I've gotten myself into. I've been working so hard on my admin license. I finally got it. And now, with all of this experience in athletics and physical education and all of that, what do I know about early literacy? but he rolled up his sleeves. He got his hands on the best reading, the best tools. He got together with his literacy specialist in his school and he got down into the phonics like you wouldn't believe. And talk about feeling empowered. He had eventually he built the skills he needed to become a very effective leader in his school. His students achieved greatly. He was respected by his teachers, but he could have easily taken an approach of kind of like, what can I generalize from what I knew? But what he actually did was got down into the specifics and was able to improve the quality of instruction that was happening in his school, even without that experience himself. So I encourage you all to let go of some of those generalizable tools and frameworks and skills that you have. And I encourage you all to get that scalpel out and dig into the math and dig into the literacy, and then figure out what are the nuts and bolts of those practices that can be shared across your systems. Robin, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about what you do as an empowered leader.
So first of all, I have to walk the talk. So if I expect my leaders to be an instructional leader and really dig in and perform surgery on the work, then I have to as well. So a quick anecdote was I took home the second grade domain on the War of 1812. And literally at the time that I took that home, and it was a lofty domain and it was a lot of reading, the only thing I knew about the War of 1812 was the year because it was in the title. Not kidding. So I read through the whole domain because I wanted to know, number one, what were student outcomes? What was the enduring understanding? And then what do teachers do every day with children to be able to get them to those enduring outcome understandings? And so I was able firsthand to read the work and see what were children reading and writing and thinking and talking about. And so that was an epiphany for me. So I expect our leaders to do the same. So you will see here a strategy document again that we developed as a partner with TNTP. And there is a whole piece of our strategy that talks about empowering leaders who scale the great teaching. So a couple of notes from the strategy are leaders are expected to goal set for teacher change in practice. And this is partnership with teachers. We are not telling teachers we are the imparters of all great things. We are side by side, shoulder to shoulder, doing the work with our teachers. Analysis of progress toward goals, that could be used through the walkthrough documents that we talked about. Providing feedback grounded in standards aligned instruction. You have to know the standards, you have to know the curriculum, and you have to know pedagogy. And then supporting eliminating obstacles to give teachers time to do the domain and unit level prep. Building the capacity of teacher leaders has been huge for us. We started with a small pilot group of 3 schools, and we poured in and brought out the gifts of those teachers and built their capacity so that then they were leaders. And when we scaled it out to our other 11 elementary schools, we had these dynamos who were advocates for the curriculum and for equity and high expectations. And then they helped us build the capacity of their peers. And then celebrating successes, that is huge for our leaders to continually encourage the heart. And then investment, we have to build investment of leaders and teachers in the materials and the impact of students and impact on students. And that's all about telling the story. And there are numbers and words to tell the story. And so Rochelle is going to getting ready to hit another sacred cow with an arrow.
All right, everyone, we're coming around the corner here. This is our last of the 5 conditions that we're going to discuss. And this one is centered around the effective use of data. I'm just going to say it, y'all. It's time for us to re-examine our relationship with data and what data we actually value the most. We love the numbers. Quantitative data is so important, but it's also what we're used to. Quantitative data helps us see trends. It helps us compare ourselves to others, compare students to one another. But what does it really tell us about effective teaching? What are students experiencing? What are teachers experiencing? What do they think about the quality of the instruction that they receive? I'm going to just give you a second. I don't normally read from the slide, but I appreciate that some of you may be listening and doing other things at the same time. So I do want you to hear this. In addition to the quantitative data that we hold so sacred, qualitative data is also incredibly valuable. It's defined as the data that approximates, it characterizes, Qualitative data can be observed and recorded. This data type is non-numerical in nature, and it's collected through methods of observation, one-on-one interviews, conducting focus groups, and sometimes just conversations, right, with students and teachers and families. Qualitative data, we must find a way to honor qualitative data in our decision making. We actually have control and power over the type of data that we present to our families, to ourselves, to our teachers. And it's honestly time for us to implement new strategies beyond the assessment data. Um, we've been doing a lot of work at Student Achievement Partners around design thinking, specifically design thinking for equity. And you might have heard this term come up lots of times, right? Human centered design, really actually taking into account the people who are most affected by problems, particularly in our education system, listening to folks, listening to families, listening to teachers and students, and then creating solutions that directly address their needs. Not our needs for data, not our needs for accolades, not our needs for annual yearly progress, but what students and teachers and families actually need. So, this sacred cow that you have to give up, it might be the data wall or the data dashboard or whatever the thing is that you've spent a tremendous amount of time building. There's value in those data, but we also have to find a way to elevate and honor qualitative data in our decision making so that we can actually influence and impact effective teaching. So I'm going to hand it over to Robin to tell you a little bit about what they've done when they think about qualitative data in Sullivan County.
So, I'm a weirdo and I have to have a quick analogy. So, I would say that you would consider me more than a number. And I always hashtag more than a number because, as I told you, I was chubby and couldn't be a cheerleader in high school. But my number on the scale does not define who I am. My doctor uses it to measure, she uses it to measure and help me become more healthy. And there is a purpose for it. But what can you tell me about that measure? It has a purpose, but it doesn't define all of our work. So similarly, the proficiency scores and RTI data depict a number. And as Rochelle said, that does give us information. But what if we release that sacred cow, use it in the context it's meant to be used, but release it as our end all be all and dig into what students actually know and are able to do on a day-to-day basis? For example, now you will see on the screen, real life second grade work. It blows my mind. And this is just one example. So look at that student work and think about this scenario. Yvette is a second grader and scored in the 24th percentile on her RTI screener. Based on the number alone, Yvette is an at-risk learner and would be assigned to an interventionist. But after reading a sample of her work, I found this is what Yvette can tell you about the War of 1812 after the domain has been taught. I'm a war hawk. I believe the US should go to war with Great Britain. I think we go to war with Britain because we want more land than Britain. Also, we don't want them controlling our waterways and taking our ships. There are reasons I want to go. These are the reasons I want to go to war with Great Britain. So I'm not going to peg Yvette to that number. I'm going to not limit her capacity to be able to learn and grow. And that, my friends, is equity. And when you have high quality curriculum that is completely, high quality curriculum is aligned to standards. It's not both and, it's all one thing. High quality curriculum and standards are just like in the same bloodstream. And Michelle, you tell me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. So I want to say, how do we make instructional decisions based solely on the number? We have to paint a holistic picture of student learning, release the sacred cow of being defined only by the number and use it as one tool in your toolkit.
Thank you so much, Robin. It's interesting. You're not looking at the QA. I am. And the first question that has come up is how are high quality instructional materials and new standards implemented simultaneously? Robin just answered. They are the same. High quality instructional materials or standards aligned instructional materials take into account the demands of the standards and integrate those concepts and practices directly into the materials that are being provided. So they go hand in hand. So it's like you're a psychic, Robin.
I'm gonna tell you
I'm
the
just
truth.
gonna.
I cheated and I saw it. So I
Oh,
was
you
trying
saw.
to, yeah, I was trying to weed it in and be like secret, but yeah, I just have to say. And also I would add high quality materials. Don't just teach a standard as a one shot and go. Like I'm going to teach main idea for this week. Skills in isolation is a practice of the past that doesn't work. High quality materials blend in the standards continually and constantly. So the spiral cyclical effect is what really solidifies and concrete student learning.
Thank you, Robin. So I'm going to just give just another moment in case there are any other questions that you have. Please go into your Hoover app. And in our session, there is a portion for questions and answers. If you have any, we're happy to take a minute or so to answer any questions that we have from the group, either from myself or specifically for Robin. We're happy to do that. And I have to say, my wait times, I have a lot of patience. So I'll give it a minute as you think and type. And if you don't have anything, that's fine too.
Hey, Rochelle, it's Kelly here. I've got a question for you.
Sure.
So I've been thinking about professional learning from the teacher perspective, and I know there's tons of teachers in the audience. So if they're thinking about, and Robin too, if they're thinking about how they'd love to see professional development change in their schools or in their departments, what are some next steps that you would suggest and Robin would suggest for them to kind of start that journey towards more targeted, content-focused, high-quality instructional material related professional learning?
Robin, I'll start and absolutely jump in. So I would say there's probably two things I would recommend. Number one, if anyone asks, answer. Like when they send the survey or when the feedback form comes at the end of the professional learning, fill it out. I know sometimes we're just like holding our breath for the end of the professional learning and just want to run out of that room or Zoom screen when it's over. But I know as a professional development provider, we take feedback so seriously. So when you're asked, how was it? What did you enjoy? What was not effective? Answer honestly, answer critically, answer in detail, because that is only going to help improve the experience for you the next time. So I would say definitely participate in those kinds of conversations. I think also the other thing is about what you can do, right? We've been talking about kind of taking the reins where you can and making changes. Um, Getting together with colleagues and digging into the content together is also incredible professional learning. I can't tell you every time I get together with colleagues and, like I said, read the text that's at the center of instruction together, try to answer the questions, try to do the writing prompt together. As teachers, you get the perspective of what it's like for students to complete those exercises, but you also benefit from working with each other.
I guess I could just add teachers have to sometimes ignite the spark, but it has to be a vertical progression of learning. So we need our directors of schools to have this sense of urgency. And at my drama queen side says moral imperative to do something to make change in our schools for teaching literacy. 1/3 of my kids is not enough to be reading on third grade level. It's a deal breaker. So we do need systemic change. So our directors have to be the leader of the expectation, but then our supervisors and our principals need to be listening to the voice of teachers and say, what is it we need to do to empower and equip you to go get this work done? You don't have to source the materials. We have a solid foundation. The footers are poured, but now we need you to be the cornerstone to build the house. What do you need me to do to support you to build the house?
All right, everyone, thank you so much for the couple of questions that did come in. And we just have one more slide to share with you. And this is just, we want this moment to be, well, actually, I might not even share the slide. What I am going to do is just ask you to consider. Um, Take a minute and reflect on the 5 conditions that we discussed today. And if you are so inclined, please use your chat function in Huda, and chat a sacred cow that you plan to leave in this session, never ever to be seen again. What's it going to be? Is it going to be a change is going to come? Or is it going to be that's just the way it is? But we're hoping that you've taken the time and the challenge to reflect on your own practices and really thinking about where there can be changes. So, just for a moment, we're going to be quiet for just a moment while you reflect. Please use the chat. Tell us what you're willing to give up after today's session. Oh, I'm reading one here. It says, a holistic picture of children. Using different types of data is so needed. Absolutely. All right. Well, it looks like it is 10 o'clock on the button. It's time for our session to end. And so, Jess, I wanted to say thank you. What a wonderful way to spend our Friday morning. Robin, let you say goodbye to our friends and colleagues that we met today.
Much love, and I know you guys are so glad and shocked that I didn't say a bad word, but there you go. I made it for a PG audience, but I'm so proud of the work you're doing in Florida, and you have to be the spark that ignites the change. So get rid of those cows. Keep thinking about the arrows.
Thank you, everyone. And Impact Florida, thank you so much for inviting us to participate in this event. Oh, good. It looks like we have a few more minutes. That's good. If there are any other questions, if there are any other chats or confessions of sacred cows we need to let go, we'd love to hear that. Okay. It looks like we got one more question here. Let's see. What professional resources should we read or research to gain more information about these topics? I'll start by saying I will direct you. Robin's got her books ready to go, so you're going to hear from her too. Please do reference the Principles for High Quality Professional Learning. It is just a distilled and very, very focused list of resources and practices that just create a really nice arc of professional learning reads for whatever you might be thinking about, either for content focused professional learning, human centered, teacher centered, student centered professional learning experiences, and also instructionally relevant and actionable practices as well. Robin?
And there's so much out there, but I began with two sources. I don't have one of them here, but Wiley Blevins wrote a book about phonics instruction. And since I wasn't taught how to teach reading based on the science of reading, and I had no idea about explicit foundational skills instruction, like literally I had a rap cassette tape where I rapped with my first graders about phonics skills. Like, I'm so ashamed to even admit that. But so the two I would start with are a phonics book by Wiley Blevins. And then this one really explains the other half of Scarborough Rope, which is E.D. Hirsch's Why Knowledge Matters. I hadn't even heard about the importance of background knowledge until 5 years ago. And if you want to just tiptoe into that, you can look at Leslie and Rex baseball study, because that very clearly proves the importance of building background knowledge. And then Doug Lamall put out a book recently called Reading Reconsidered. Haven't read it yet. And then Natalie Wexler's Knowledge Gap. But if you want to tiptoe, there's lots of blogs and good information on curriculummatters.org also that can get you started.
Robin, we have a question here that might be a good one for you as well. It says, given what you have said about the quantitative data versus qualitative data, what are your views on school grades, which are completely quantitative?
So, school grades. First of all, in K2, we have a standards-based report card. So we take our knowledge and skill strands of CKLA, and we actually score standards mastery instead of a number in K2. And I guess that's what the question means. And then 3-5, we play the grading game, but I have a hard time digesting that. We do it because we have to by state law, but it's hard to think about teachers who may not give students an opportunity to correct missteps and to really show mastery versus the one time they're taking the assessment and getting the number. So I think if you want to dig into the work, you can also start thinking about scoring student work samples instead of the multiple choice where we're testing those isolated skills. It has to be tied, and high quality materials also give you so many ways to assess students instead of just printing out, which I did, the multiple choice document where they fill in A, B, C, or D on the isolated skill, which shows really not at all what they know except day to day. So it's not really an answer to your question, but it's maybe a way to frame it so we can think differently about grading.
Thank you, Robin. We have another question I think I'll take on. This question is, how should we evaluate the success of professional learning activities? Are feedback surveys enough? I would say no, feedback surveys are not enough. They are important because, again, you're hearing from the people who are closest to the professional learning experience that has been designed. So that's critical. But I would also say that if you are using things like content or subject specific uh, observation rubrics, for example, or you know that you've done professional learning on a specific pedagogical technique, looking at student work and actually looking like down the road. So if I as a teacher were trained on a particular strategy, what kinds of changes would we expect to see in student work and student engagement as a result of that learning and that new technique or pedagogy? So in addition to feedback surveys, I would say being in classrooms and watching teachers and students interact, because ultimately our goal is that student experiences and student outcomes are improving. So one way of gauging the effectiveness of professional learning is to see if it's actually impacting student learning in a positive direction. I would definitely say thinking about that. And like we said, really using content specific frameworks also help really get to isolating what your inputs are so that you can then measure whether those inputs really affected the changes that you wanted. Robin, there is one more question too that might be really good for you. Can you share ideas or examples of how districts can effectively leverage qualitative data in an era when data driven is so highly emphasized?
So, leveraging the data is telling the story. So, when I've talked to the Board of Education, asking for them to support the work, I show lots of things. I can show that we outpaced the state in third grade by 6% proficiency. I can show that we have decreased students with special needs scoring in the below category by 20% over 2 years. But if I paint the whole picture, what resonates with you based on your comments is the picture of student work and the picture of parents talking to us about, oh my gosh, my kid came home and taught me all about the 5 systems of the human body. I mean, like bringing all the pieces together. We all have to understand accountability, but I go to sleep at night knowing the stories about children being able to talk about civil rights and talk about how Ray Charles added value to the world and talk about history and talk about the circulatory system. That's how I sleep at night. So we are held accountable, but hey, and I'm telling you something, we also publicize. I tweet all the time about celebrations. I celebrate teachers all the time. And I also write press releases so that the community can understand how we're raising the bar and fighting for literacy in our area.
Thank you so much, Robin. It looks like our chat lit up, but I can't see all of the amazing kind of chat responses. Robin, I'll tell you a few. We got someone, Cindy said she loves the standards based report card idea. So thank you for that. Um, and One-time assessment with no room for improvement hinders students' opportunities to grow academically, right? Amen to that. And we also had, Robin, a request. Maybe we can do this afterwards. Someone would love to see a list of all the book recommendations that you held up. So maybe we can chat that out for everybody later on. That'd be terrific too.